All right, everyone, welcome back. We have a great friend of mine. Her name is Jamie Harris. Jamie, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. We want to try and get to know a little bit more about psychology and also about psychiatry. I know there's different views of what people think that is and how it affects them. Can you kind of tell us in your words, based on your experience, what people should know about that?
Sure. A lot of times they're used interchangeably. I think, the prefix psych, but psychiatry is a medical degree that involves prescribing services, and that's mainly what psychiatrists do. So a psychiatrist is someone you're going to go to if you have a mental health concern that requires some medication. Some psychiatrists do therapy, but many, to be honest, aren't necessarily qualified to do therapy because that's not something that their programs focus on. For psychologists, our programs focus on different types of therapy. We usually pick a different therapy track depending on what we're interested in, and we learn different methods that way and then through practice and training. And then another difference with psychologists is that we also do psych assessments. So depending on where you're working, what your area of proficiency is, it might be something like, I want to know if I have ADHD. I want to know if my child has autism. So we also do those types of services as well, where we do interviews and give appropriate assessments and then are able to give somebody a good diagnostic impression with some data.
So what inspired you to become a psychologist?
Well, I think, as is true of many people in my field, I just have had a very colorful family background.
Oh, who doesn't, though?
Yeah, exactly. So it's something about helping people, but also understanding things in a different way. And yeah, I found that it's a really great fit, and I've met just amazing people. And, it's great to have a job where I really care about the people I work with, and I get to spend time with different types of people and learn new things. So I really like that about it. So it's ended up being a good fit, but yeah, stressful at times.
Oh, yeah, no, I can imagine.
Do you think that the myth about mental health has gotten better over time? Because I know years ago, especially for men, a lot of men, me included, would hold stuff in. We really, you're kind of taught to not really display emotions. But do you feel that's kind of changing these days now?
Yes, I definitely think so. I mean, there is still some of that sticks around, especially from people of that generation and the generation before them. But it's amazing to see, unfortunately, a lot of kids these days and teenagers are struggling with mental health concerns, and a lot of them are very pro-therapy and pro-seeking help, which is a really great thing. Certainly not happy to see more mental health issues, but definitely happier that people are talking about it more and making it more normal to seek out help when it's needed. So I would say it also depends on the region you live in too.
Really?
If you're going to live in a more conservative area, more southern, mental health might not be as recognized as it is in a more urban area too, or as normalized. Chicago is great because everybody has a therapist in Chicago, it seems like. So.
Everybody needs a therapist in Chicago. So what, it's kind of a thankless job, in my opinion. What keeps you going when you are listening to other people's problems all day long?
I would say it's the people that I'm working with. It's an honor for somebody to open up and tell you about, their fears, their past, their worries, their concerns. It's a very vulnerable place to be in, and I don't take that for granted at all. And I've just met some amazing people that have overcome so much, and I'm really honored to be that person for them.
Yeah.
And, there's also a lot of imposter syndrome that comes in there, like, who am I to help this person with this problem? But people have free will, and they could always go to a different therapist, and the fact that they stick with me means a lot to me.
Sure. That makes sense.
Now, what do you think about someone who's really thinking about, getting into some type of maybe psychology, maybe it could be psychiatry, something to where they want to help people, but they're a little gun shy because, they're, all the myths of, well, I'm not going to make a lot of money, I'm going to struggle, who am I, all these different things going on. What type of person would be a good person to try and get into this field, you think?
Well, it's important for anybody to have good coping skills. It's certainly not a requirement for somebody that goes into this field to have no mental health concerns. In fact, I think some of the better therapists or drug counselors, alcohol counselors have had experience. But a lot of it is how you cope and manage stress. So you have to really build those skills up so that you can be effective and not transfer too much on your clients while still being able to relate and empathize with them. So I think that is a very important part of it. Having a curiosity is important. Not being judgmental is huge. Learning how to put your own biases aside is really huge, because you hear things sometimes that are completely contradictory to what you've been taught or what you believe, and it's important not to let that show, because that will turn somebody right away from opening up.
And actually, similar to that, if there is someone who is struggling with their mental health and they just have nowhere to turn, where would you say is a good place to start looking into it? I mean, going to your family doctor or just going to a support group? Where would you say would be a good place to go?
It really depends on what you're looking for. A family doctor can be a good place to start for a referral for like a psychiatrist if you're looking for medication. It's definitely good to have an evaluation even if you don't choose to use medication, just to know what's available. And then as far as therapy goes, we know the most important thing with therapy is finding somebody that you fit with. It doesn't even really matter how much experience the person has had or what their modality is. It really depends on if you feel comfortable with them. So one thing that I always recommend, is Psychology Today has a ton of therapists. It's like a menu, pretty much. You can like type in where you live, you can type in your insurance, and it gives you like someone's picture, it gives you their bio. And of course, you can't tell everything by reading a bio and seeing a picture, but at least it gives you a place to start, especially if you're looking for a certain demographic of therapist or something else that might help you feel more comfortable. So I think that's a really great resource. Also insurance has to be a consideration, unfortunately, because insurance, we don't have Medicare for all. So, it depends on also what's affordable to you. There are some really great therapists that work at community mental health centers. So if somebody doesn't have insurance or if they have Medicaid, there are options available. So
now let me ask you this. If someone was serious about trying to get into this field, what advice or what direction would you give them if they really wanted to do this and they wanted to do something right now?
The advice that I would give is to just know that you have to get an advanced degree in order to do anything really independently. So I was pretty disheartened when I got my bachelor's degree, and I thought that was pretty fancy, and then I was not.
4 years,
I just
done.
had my own, I stayed at my job as a inpatient unit because that was what I was qualified to do. And then I managed a group home, which was incredibly stressful and not something I had any experience in,
Yeah.
Sure.
And so it's just important to know that that might be discouraging, but then there is the next step where you can get a master's degree. You can choose to go on and get a doctorate. So main piece of advice is to know that it's going to be time consuming, it's going to be costly, but the thing I've noticed about it that I think is really important is that you have a ton of options. So you can do so many different things within the field. And there are opportunities to make a decent living. Not so much in community mental health, but private practice and in other places.
If there, again, me and Lawrence are just bouncing off of each other here. If there was, let's say, if you wanted your child to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, is there a specific way to talk to them about that or to convince them? Or, how would you get them to go? Do what they don't want to do?
Oh, that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
And I've definitely dealt with that before.
Have you?
Oh, absolutely. I worked at a neuropsych clinic, and we worked with a lot of kids who were on the spectrum. They don't see the point of therapy. A lot of them don't. And I don't blame them for not seeing the point of therapy. So it was, a lot of it was parents kind of making them go, and then me trying to adapt with them and make it as fun as possible by bringing in their interests and making it about more than just talking, so that it didn't seem like this torturous thing where they had to come talk to some dorky adult for 45 minutes. But yeah, it can be very hard to convince your kiddo to go if they're not into it. I think seeing more about what it's like and knowing that this is a person that's just here for you, and you don't have to just talk the whole time, you can just hang out and do other things. I think that can be helpful too, so that they don't feel like they're being grilled,
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Nobody wants to sit on a couch and get grilled for 45 minutes.
Well, and especially if they think there's a right and wrong answer too, and just telling you what you want to hear, and so then it's not helpful at all. So.
Yeah, and also for teenagers, I'm thinking in particular, it's not like we have to tell the parents everything, a teenager, unless they're telling you something that's dangerous.
Right.
If they're putting themselves in any kind of harm's way, that's one thing. But, everybody does sneaky little things when they're
Absolutely.
teenagers, and that's not something I'm going to go back and tell your parents, unless there's a reason why I need to.
Sure.
So I think sometimes they don't want to talk to therapists because they feel like the therapist is just going to go back and relay everything to their parents. And a good trustworthy therapist will find a way to skirt that line without having to do that.
Sure. Well, you know what? We have to take a quick break, but we want you to stick around because we're going to have a great thirsty conversation. So for everyone else, we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back.
You have such a calm voice.
All right, everybody, we're back with Jamie Harris, and we're going to have a thirsty conversation. So, Kristen, what are we talking about?
Okay, so this has been a hunch, a suspicion I've had throughout the whole pandemic, and now I can actually ask a professional about it. Do you think the pandemic has caused more stress and anxiety and depression in the United States, and how has it affected us mentally?
Absolutely.
No, what?
Well, it's been an interesting year. It really has been. And, from like a more, I guess, quantitative standpoint too, when I started my new job right at the beginning of the pandemic, very good timing, it did not take long for me to fill up a caseload, because as the pandemic started, very few people were really interested in doing telehealth. I think we thought that things were going to progress more quickly than they did, and we were going to get back to normal quicker. But as things continued, more and more people reached out to the point where we have wait lists,
Wow.
Yeah, because I think more and more people are realizing that we need that human connection. We don't want to necessarily unload on our family members all the time. We have a lot of great natural supports, but the best thing about a therapist is that it's somebody just for you to talk to. It doesn't have to be reciprocal. You don't have to worry about, I'm going through a hard time. Am I dumping too much on this person?
Sure.
That's my job. So that is something that more people seem to have been embracing. And a lot of the themes that I've seen over this year, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of boredom and malaise, and is this ever going to end? There has been a lot of the more lower levels of depression that I've seen with clients this year, where it's not necessarily clinical, it's not necessarily interfering with functioning significantly, but it's enough where low motivation, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to get out of bed, I'm not going to the gym, I'm gaining weight, and
I think we all did that a little bit. But
yeah, and that's part of the stress response, part of that low level of anxiety from being in a traumatic situation a long time that doesn't resolve itself.
Wow.
Now, the interesting thing that I've seen, being that things are opening up, you would think that people will be happy, they want to get out, have a good time, enjoy themselves. What's surprising to me is the level of anger. Like, for example, on airplanes, people fighting, the attendants. One attendant literally having her teeth knocked out. I mean, it's just nuts. And it's, kind of almost like an epidemic right now. And I've never seen it before. I mean, from your standpoint, what do you think is going on there? I mean, I would think that, everybody be happy. Okay, so what, you got to wear a mask on the plane, but I don't think it's worth, getting into fights over it.
Yeah, injuring somebody.
Exactly,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, when it comes to anxiety, we hear about the fight or flight system. I think these people are having a little extra dose of fight when they're out in public and something inconveniences them, and just being on edge already because we're not used to being out in public the same way. We're not used to being around people, and then not addressing that properly, it's going to come out in a, I guess, what we call like a maladaptive way.
So I know you kind of mentioned this a little bit with your caseload influx. Do you feel that some people just reached out to you only to have somebody to talk to, and then you talk to them and you're like, well, you don't seem extra depressed or extra anxious, and it just was like, oh, you need a friend? I mean, was that any of your...
I think to some extent.
Yeah.
Generally everybody has something that they're working on, but it's once again just the facet of having someone that you can talk to that's just for you, and not having to worry about burning out a family member or a friend. So yeah, definitely have people that don't come in for a specific reason, but they're like, I think I just want to have a therapist.
I think I just need somebody.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And I also, I've personally thought, I guess until the pandemic, that depression and anxiety were all biological traits. I mean, this is, again, me and my stupidity. But, I've always been the person that's like, you can go through a bad situation and not necessarily get anxiety from it or depression. And then going through this, I think for this prolonged period of time has really made me see that a situation can cause depression. I know that's, you're like, yeah, I know. I went to college for this, that happens. But I mean, really, that a situation can change you chemically and physically. That's astonishing to me.
Well, we tend to feel like we can get through anything. People have had it worse. People have been through worse is a thing I hear all the time. And so I think it is surprising when we find ourselves on the other end of that. I'm really not myself anymore. I'm not sleeping well. Yeah. I have no energy. And it's amazing how those things can sneak up when you least expect it. So don't feel bad about not knowing that. It's, it's, I guess, part of our Constitution in a lot of ways.
Sure.
We can get through this.
Right.
People have been through worse, but it really takes its toll.
What do you say to people who have been fully vaccinated? They've stayed away from people, stayed in their house. They did all the right things. Now that things are opening up, they still have this anxiety about, going out, not wearing a mask, even though they don't need to, going around people or even having people over their house. What do you say to people that are kind of struggling with now that things are opening back up
People
again?
like me is what you're saying. People like me. What would you say to people?
Well, I didn't go there, but
So many mixed messages about what's actually safe and what isn't. So it's even hard to sit in that chair and be like, oh, this is pathological, because it's hard to say what's agoraphobia or what's an anxiety disorder and what's somebody being extra cautious, because we get different information all the time. So I think that's been a major struggle, trying to help people navigate while not knowing, because it's hard to tell where that line is. And I feel like even though things are opening up and seem safer now, we've got this Delta variant and other things are coming into play where it's really a thin line. And it's really hard to tell sometimes if I should be pushing somebody to do more, or pushing them to address anxiety and avoidance, or if it's just a natural variation of the reaction that we have to this very bizarre situation that we're in.
Yeah. And I think, to me, it's changed me as a person. I used to be more I used to go to parties and feel energized from them, and now having experienced being in my house for a year, I like it. And I am I don't maybe want to go out. But, I'm still living with a daughter and a husband who are let's go. You know, so I mean, I know I'm trying to relearn, you know, what old Kristen was like, you know.
Right. Yeah, we've never had that taken away for such a long time. Yeah.
The length of time, I think, makes such a difference.
It does. And we spent so much time being fearful and avoidant of other people because they could be carrying this disease. And now we're like, oh, I'm just supposed to be comfortable being in this crowded airport, you know?
Right. And also avoiding, you know, avoiding people because of the pandemic. You also avoided people you didn't like. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the coworkers you didn't like, you know? And now you're like, that really made my life better, not being around you. And now I have to go back. So.
Right, like my life's short. Maybe I won't go to that brunch. With
because I don't
so-and-so.
really feel good doing it. And COVID was a really good excuse to avoid those things.
It really was. Yeah, or like family reunions. Or,
right.
You know.
Well, it's a great
No,
time.
I love my family.
It's a great time to reevaluate because I know a lot of people, including myself, you know, when you're locked in your house for a whole year, you're not really going out, you're not doing anything, you know, you kind of evaluate what's important. And sometimes things that you look at don't look the same anymore. You know, it's like, hey, I'm doing this, you know, you get up, you go to work, come home, take care of your family, go to bed, then you get up, do it all over again. And, you know, you get to a point that's like, okay, life's got to be more than this, you know what I mean? And a lot of times you get to that point where you evaluate things. So even though, yeah, it was hell going through that year, but I think it was self-reflection, in my opinion, you know, for a lot of people, as far as reevaluating what they really want to do.
And I think that take on it, though, I mean, I think personally shows, I mean, especially I think for you and I, because I know you and I well enough, that, I mean, it shows how good we had it through the pandemic also. Because, I mean, I know anxiety's really flared for people who, you know, lost their jobs or whose loved ones, you know, got COVID, you know. And so, I mean, I really think that contributed to the, you know, financial loss and you know, losing a family member really contributed to people's depression and anxiety. And, you know, the being stuck at home is almost the best part of the worst of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I tell you, this was a great segment. We had so much fun with you, Jamie.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Hopefully you come back.
Absolutely.
All right, then. Well, everyone else, don't go too far. We're going to take another quick break. Welcome back, everyone. We had a fantastic show. We had so much fun with Jamie Harris.
It was very cathartic.
Yes.
We got through, I feel like we unpacked a lot of things with the psychologist.
Yes. We went over a lot of stuff, had a lot of great fun. I want to make sure that I want to thank the American Legion for letting us have our shows here. We really appreciate it.
As always, check us out on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, Thirsty Conversations, and also on Pan TV.
All right, everyone. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. And don't forget to have those thirsty conversations. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.